We got 2 games left, right? We got Senior Day coming up in Scott Stadium. That's extremely important, and then we got an opportunity to play in a rivalry game in the last game. And man, we're fighting. We're scrapping for postseason play. That's been a huge goal of ours as a team, and so we're going to look at whatever gives us the best opportunity. And I told AC that man, it wasn't anything that was final. It was just, man, we were struggling on offense, and we needed to see if we could find a spark. And I think it was, at that time the right thing to do. And then we'll go back, we'll look at the tape, we'll evaluate it, we'll discuss it as a staff before we make any decisions going forward. I think it was just a situation in the game where, man, the offense needed a spark, and we were trying to see if Tony could. And we need both of those guys, right? And for me, I'm not turning this into a quarterback controversy, right? It's unfortunate. It was a game where, man, we needed a spark, and we felt like the right thing to do was to give Muskett. And then now that we have this body of work to look at, man, we're going to go back as a staff, evaluate it, and figure out what's the best path forward.
Tony Elliott may not want to call it a quarterback controversy, but there's certainly a quarterback question in Charlottesville. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jackie Franchuli for Oahu's 24/7, and we're here on it's Friday. It's a little late for our podcast this week, but I'll get to it in a second because we have a lot of recruiting news to discuss. In addition to Virginia football's quarterback question, obviously, coming into this game against SMU, it is a big game for UVA, who fell to Notre Dame last weekend. They're still one win away from bowl eligibility, and they have 2 chances at getting that 1 win, but only one of those games is get to play in front of the home crowd at Scott Stadium. It'll be Senior Day against SMU on Saturday for Virginia. So Virginia will be saying farewell to many of its seniors, including defensive back Jonas Sanker, center Brian Stevens, defensive end Cam Butler, are some of the seniors that will be honored on Saturday during a pregame. Now, before we get going, talking a little bit about that quarterback question and also that loss to Notre Dame, and then obviously we move forward to SMU and those recruiting news that I was waiting to record the podcast with, then why don't you go ahead and like this video on YouTube, like this channel, but also head on over to wherever you listen to this podcast and rate us so that we can continue to grow this show. And obviously go to Wahoo's 24/7. That's where we have continuous coverage of Virginia football, of Virginia men's basketball, and all of Virginia sports. We are having some exciting news coming to Wahoo's 24/7 in the month of December. There will be new additions to the staff, so we're really excited about that. So head over to Wahoo's 24/7 for all the coverage, especially with those big recruiting event happening this weekend on grounds. There'll be a lot of content coming in on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, kind of those days where we get those reactions from people on grounds visiting. So let's get started, because the big talking point around grounds and around Charlottesville, around Virginia football, is should Tony Elliott and his staff continue and stick with Anthony Colandrea as their starting quarterback, or should they move to Tony Muskett, Virginia's starter last season before he was hurt? And the guy they've gone for relief in the last few games and all, who came in the second half against Notre Dame and did quite well. So should Virginia stick with Anthony Colandrea or move on to Tony Muskett, or will they? So, and we'll have more of what UVA says in just a moment. We've obviously asked Tony Elliott about the quarterback situation during his Tuesday press conference. We also asked defensive coordinator Des Kitching about his opinion on the quarterback question as well. So all that is coming up in a little bit on the podcast. But first, let's talk about why this question has come about. So Anthony Colandrea threw 3 picks against Notre Dame in 3 consecutive series. That kind of led to a spiral to Virginia losing that game. Obviously, other things went wrong. We can point to Kobe Pace's fumble as Virginia was about to score as kind of the precipice for the loss against Notre Dame. Momentum really swung against the Irish. It was a 7-0 game, possibly becoming 7-7, and suddenly they were down 14-0. And then Anthony Colandrea felt like he needed to press more. He was taking a little bit more risks, and those risks led to those interceptions. The issue, when you look at what's been going on with Virginia the last few weeks, is Anthony Colandrea hasn't seemed like himself. He has been throwing more picks. He's thrown 7 in 4 games. He doesn't seem at all comfortable. Virginia did win against Pitt, and that's something you have to commend Virginia offense in performing and regrouping after the lackluster performance against North Carolina prior to the bye week. But it was a game where Virginia's run game was able to kind of take center stage. So they didn't rely so much on the passing game. And that was the same thing when you looked at Coastal Carolina. It was kind of the ground game, kind of took a little bit off Anthony Colandrea. Now, before we kind of go into the nuances and the details and the stats that when we talk about Anthony Colandrea, you have to give him some things. For instance, against North Carolina, he was playing behind Noah Josie. Noah Josie is a very talented offensive lineman. He's had Offensive Lineman of the Week honors. He's improved in his run blocking, but he's also played right guard for most of his career. And he was going to be possibly the fourth choice at center. Obviously, Brian Stevens had pneumonia that week and couldn't play against North Carolina. The next guy on that rotation, you can argue, was Noah Hartzell, who kind of took most of those reps during spring prior to his season-ending injury. And then the next guy would have been Ty Furnish, who played center for Virginia. And it was a guy that they considered being center before Brian Stevens kind of took over. He was also hurt. So not only were you having a new right guard, you also had a new center, and you had no option behind center. So you had to move a guy who plays left guard, move him into center, then have different guards in that position, both sides. So against North Carolina, you have to give Colandrea the point where the offensive line was different. The offensive line was not giving him enough time to throw the ball. It wasn't just Anthony Colandrea. So you have to give him that when you talk and evaluate his season. The O-line wasn't great in that game against UNC because of all those injuries. The other thing you have to give Anthony Colandrea, and it's where the questions at the wide receiver position. Once Trell Harris went down, Virginia missed that deep field threat. Virginia has not been able to find a wide receiver that can get separation and get those yards after a catch and just get those big plays. Virginia has not been able to convert those explosive plays since Trell Harris went down. So they haven't had that number 2 receiver. Chris Tyree has struggled. I mean, he had a good game against Pitt, so you thought it was going to be a breakthrough for him. But because of his injuries, it's kind of taking a little longer for him to kind of get acclimated and getting to that condition that he needs for games. So you have Chris Tyree struggling. So Darren Harrison also had injuries. Jared Wilson returned from an injury. So there's not those wide receivers are struggling against man coverage as well. So it's taking plays time to develop, which is time that Anthony Colandrea does not have. So let's dive into why we're talking about possibly having Tony Muskett either starting or playing more, or maybe Anthony Colandrea starting, having a shorter leash on Saturday. So when you look in the last few games, when Virginia was playing early on in the season, having success, they were having big explosive plays. In the last few games, ironically, they haven't been having a lot of big plays passing wise, but their run game, I think they average about 150 yards on the ground in 3 of the last 4 games. So they've improved on the ground game. But in the last few, and like against Notre Dame, they were 1 for 8 on throws of 10 or more yards. Against Pitt, they were 0 for 5 on any passing plays of 10 to 20 yards. That intermediate passing game has been an issue for this offense in the last few weeks since the kind of downward turn of what Virginia season looked like. And in the last few games, Anthony Colandrea has had more picks than completions. It's a lot of stuff. Like, again, you look at the offensive line injury, you look at Trell Harris's injuries. You definitely get a lot of possibilities with Anthony Colandrea. He, like we mentioned in preseason, he is a guy that will give you some magic here and there. You're going to have those risks with him. But in the last few weeks, what you also have is someone who's scrambling a lot, which is great because he can extend plays with his legs, but he's also scrambling and getting sacked and moving away. Sometimes when you look back on tape, sometimes it seems like he might be moving away from his blockers or moving in a situation where he does not have blockers in front of him. So moving away by any blockers potentially. Now, the one thing everyone points to Tony Muskett. So that is the next phase. Tony Muskett, every time he's come on as a reliever, he's looked good. He's looked sharp. Now, against Clemson, you can argue that he was playing with the second and the third team. Against Notre Dame, he did face some of the first team, and he did score 2 touchdowns in that second half and covered the game for Virginia when it comes to the spread. He was 9 of 14, 404 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Tony Muskett, Anthony Colandrea, the game plan doesn't change as much. Now, the only thing that you'll say is that the height does affect, right? Anthony Colandrea is about 5'10". Tony Muskett is over 6 feet. Those extra inches does benefit Muskett in a way where he can let go of the ball a lot quicker because he can stay inside the pocket. With Anthony Colandrea, he does need to take a step so that he moves it to the side and then gets a bit better field of vision because of his height. When he does that, that allows the defense in front of him to have another second or two and see what's going to happen, having that set. And you also have an issue that sometimes you might have those picks that you see defenders kind of just put their hands up in the air, which you get those picks where you have those defense kind of tip the ball into another player's hands, where you've seen that a few times this season for Anthony Colandrea. So when you have an offensive line that might not be 100% healthy or might have issues yet and might be more porous than you would want, and you have a quarterback that needs an extra second or two, that's where you might struggle with. With Tony Muskett, you might be able to get the ball quicker. Now, Anthony Colandrea does take more risks than Tony Muskett, so you were losing that angle. But what Tony Muskett did show is he also uses his legs, which is something that is not discussed more about. Usually you're talking about Anthony Colandrea's ability to scramble and extend those plays. Not many people talk about Tony Muskett's ability to extend plays with his legs. And for sure, it's not as, I guess, not as much as Colandrea, but he certainly showed against Notre Dame that possibility. So those are the two differences there. But again, it's a interesting situation for the staff. And they were asked about it. I asked Tony Elliott during his Tuesday press conference his thoughts on not only Tony Muskett's evaluation in the game and what he sees as a step forward in this competition between Anthony Colandrea and Tony Muskett.
He's prepared, considering the circumstances. Each week, he's owned the game plan and been ready to go. He gave us a spark. He found a way to help us move the ball and score some points. And just evaluating it, when you look at it, AC had a bad, really 3 minutes in the second quarter. Right, he had three throws I know he wants back, all trying to make plays, and so just after evaluating it, did feel like obviously it opened up opportunity for Tony to have a chance to take a few more first team reps, and want to see how AC is gonna respond. And so far the week has gone well. They both have taken reps with the first team and just been going about owning the game plan. If we were to play today, obviously AC would run out there first. I believe that, the week before he went up and won a road game, and made some big plays in a top 25 matchup. And he's put us in position to win a lot of football games. And I think that yes, he wants 3 throws back, but I still think that he reserves the right to have an opportunity to show how he's going to respond. And so far, he's done a really good job with the things that we've asked him to do. And but also too, I think Tony has warranted more opportunity, to prepare himself and to go compete for the job. So we're still looking at everything throughout the course of the week. But up to this point, it's been good to see both of them go out and respond and do a good job getting the plan down.
Andrews probably escapes it a little bit sooner or more frequently than Tony does. Tony's, really confident in the pocket. He likes the middle of the field, but he can make throws to the perimeter too, like he threw the goal ball to Mal Saturday. So that's probably the difference, yeah.
What have you seen? Is there a commonality in the interceptions? Coach Elliott kind of mentioned the idea of just trying to maybe do too much. What have you seen in the picks?
So you're referring to Notre Dame game?
Really the last 7 of them, say.
Yeah, so I guess that would go back. North Carolina one was tipped, right? And then
bounced off Malcolm's hands.
Ball at Pitt. And then the second one at Pitt, number 9, I think he's an all-world player. He made an unbelievable play on that, kind of in the blind spot of the quarterback. And then Notre Dame, one was ill-advised, obviously. The one where he was throwing it to Mal, he just stared it down, and the safety read his eyes and stayed there, and he didn't get off of it. Ill-advised, probably trying to force the ball to Mal and trying to get something going. He's got a lot of confidence in Mal, right? And he admitted to that, right? He's just trying to make a play in that situation. Same thing with the one escaping out to his left. He knew immediately. Unfortunately, he made the play, but he knew immediately it was not the play to make. If we would have not had the fumble and been we felt it would be 7-7, then maybe he not have pressed, right? Just because of the flow of it, right? You felt like something needed to be made, a play needed to be made, and I think he pressed to try to make a play and force some stuff. And unfortunately, we had to deal with it and learn from it. And even for Tony, right? If he's in there, right, you can't press, right? The plays come to you, and the good plays to not throw it to the other team and try to give us another play, a snap of football.
I think the confidence level between everybody is, we're behind whoever coach chooses. That's going to be, they're both ready to play, and they both prep like they're going to play.
How is Tony, I know you're close with him, how has he handled just this season and kind of just waiting his turn or behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's not easy being a number 2 guy, going into camp and saying, you're going to be a backup. Tony's an exceptional teammate, and he's an even better human being. He comes to work every day, and he preps like it.
So you not only heard from Tony Elliott, you also heard from Des Kitchings there, and also from some players like Brian Stevens. So a lot of thoughts on this quarterback battle. Like I said, this would be an interesting decision. I wouldn't have been shocked if you said that Tony Muskett was starting. It seems like they're going to stick with Anthony Colandrea from everything that has said publicly to the media this past week. So it is, you can assume that Anthony Colandrea will be your starter, but I would imagine that possibly Tony Muskett is going to have an opportunity, or at least Colandrea will have a shorter leash this week if his mind, or if he doesn't come out as one would expect. It's a very delicate balance when you have a young quarterback, because he's still a young quarterback. Yes, he's had a lot of now playing time. Last year, it was one of those situations where he didn't expect to play. This year, he expected to play after the fall camp. But with a young quarterback, you also have to deal with mentally. You don't want to cause an issue of confidence, because quarterbacks is all about confidence, right? You don't want to affect the young man's confidence. So you have to really, it's the psychological aspect of this, because you're also building for the future of the program. So, and you expect that Anthony Colandrea is the future at that position at quarterback for Virginia, and that's what the staff has said. So right now, it's how you manage the next 2 games, because at the end of the day, Virginia needs a postseason, something that was a big goal for UVA, and they've got 2 opportunities to do that, including playing at home this Saturday, but also against a rival next week. So a lot of decisions there, and it's something where both players are taking reps with the ones. They're both sharing those responsibilities, and then you also got to think at the locker room. It seems like both of them are really well liked in that locker room. So it's all up to the coaches on what the steps forward are for the game against SMU. And speaking of the game against SMU, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to preview the game of SMU, but also talk about recruiting, because Virginia is hosting a lot of visitors this weekend. And welcome back to the Go to Old Podcast. I'm Jack Finchilly for House 24/7. We kind of spent all that first half of the show just breaking down the quarterback battle per quarterback question, because that is something that obviously is the big news coming into this game. We couldn't even talk about, honestly, the defensive line, who's still a lot of improvement. If you look at the defense against Notre Dame, they did enough to win. They gave them opportunities against Notre Dame, and it's been kind of a consistent thing after the bye week. The defensive front, Terrell Jones, Camp Butler, Chico Bennett, they haven't been able to get to the quarterback per se. They haven't been able to kind of get that sack, but they haven't been getting more pressure and causing a little bit more havoc up front. And it's been a better performance for John Rudzinski's men. So against SMU, they'll definitely have to be on point, since they're the second ranked scoring offense in the ACC. They've averaged just under 40 points a game. They're on a 7-game winning streak. They moved up conferences, and now they're in contention for the ACC championship. They're in discussion among the college football playoffs. So SMU is definitely a team that is playing for a lot. And like I said in the first half, Virginia is also playing for things. They're all playing for a postseason opportunity. They need one win to get to that bowl. And when you look at SMU, you obviously look at that ground game. It's going to be a tough task for Virginia's linebacker unit, who will be without James Jackson, but also has Cam Robinson, who's been dealing with an injury the last few weeks in his shoulder. And he is a game day decision as this game approaches. So their linebacker unit is thin. They'll be relying on Dorian Jones, Trey McDonald, and youngster Landon Danley in that room against a very talented running back room. And also Kevin Jennings, the quarterback for SMU, is quite a talent. He can definitely spread the ball around. And he's had 198 yards and 15 touchdowns this season. So the defense has to really hold him down as they play against SMU, while the offense has to make sure they keep the ball. One of the things that really hurt them against Notre Dame was all those turnovers. I mean, Notre Dame's points in the first half was all off of Virginia's turnovers. They were able to kind of go ahead really early, not only off of those 3 picks from Anthony Colandrea, but that first turnover on the kickoff and the opening kickoff where they muffed that return. And then Notre Dame kind of took advantage. So Virginia has to play clean football to take this opportunity. But this is potential trap game for SMU as well. SMU is in a kind of a high. They are in a 7-game winning streak. They're playing for something. They're getting a lot of national attention. So you can easily overlook a Virginia team. But Virginia has shown when they're playing at their highest potential that they can play spoilers. I mean, they almost beat Louisville, a team where no one gave them any opportunities to win. Louisville was lucky to go out of Charlottesville a winner in that game. And Virginia beat Pitt on the road. Virginia has done well on the road against some teams. Obviously, Wake Forest with that comeback win. I mean, they beat Boston College with a comeback win. So Virginia has potential if they play cleanly. So this is going to be a game where a lot of focus on Virginia playing clean. How is that quarterback play going to be against SMU? And can they take advantage of SMU's secondary? And again, the defense playing well on third down, just like they did against Notre Dame. I think that was also one thing that wasn't highlighted enough on the defense, because they did really well against Notre Dame. I think they were 1 for 12, 1 for 13, the Irish at the end of the game. So again, the defense did well there and making stops, and they fought the whole way. I mean, in that second half, they still were, even though they were really behind and it wasn't likely they can come out to come back, they still were making stops. I mean, that was a big 4th down stop where they prevented Notre Dame from scoring. So they showed a lot of fight. So this defense is going to have their hands cut out. Their 3, 2, 1. This defense is certainly going to have their hands full when it comes to SMU. I think this is going to be, before I kind of get into recruiting, a quick prediction. I think this is going to be a closer game. I think this is a game where Virginia can keep it close. I know I said the exact same thing when we're talking about Notre Dame, but I do think this is a game where they can keep this close if they play cleanly. I think that a lot of it has also got to do with the defense. I think the defense has shown their ability to really go up against some good offenses and good teams. So if they can keep this close and let the offense find their rhythm, find that ground game, then Virginia has a legit shot. But I think it'll be closer than what people expect. I still think SMU will leave the game with a win, but I think it'll be a lot closer game to that. And I think we do see Tony Muskett at some point. I think we will see. I'm not going to predict a start from Tony Muskett, but I do think Tony Muskett will play. Now, what I also expect is going to be a lot of visitors coming to grounds. Now, we've been talking about visitors coming to this game for a while. We've confirmed official visitors over the course of the last few weeks, and we actually confirmed another one on Friday morning, which is who I was waiting for a confirmation. A 4-star defensive back out of Louisiana, 4-star Kyle Johnson, will be on grounds. He's currently committed to Houston. He's visited Mississippi State earlier in the season. It was a school that people thought were trending for him prior to his commitment to Houston, but decided he wanted to commit to Houston. Right now, he does not have a Virginia offer, but he's still visiting. So it'll be interesting to see if a UVA offer does change things for him. He's one of those visitors that it'll be interesting to see how an offer would change the dynamic of his recruitment. But he's not the only one visiting. Virginia's hosting several official visitors. And honestly, I would put Virginia under commitment watch with some of these visitors, including a commitment that's committed to James Madison a former commitment of USF, is also going to be on grounds. He's also a guy that I would consider as a commitment watch. Josiah Persinger. I think it'll be good for Virginia to have current commit Christopher Spence on his official visit. The edge rusher that I spoke with, that's a USF commit, Evan Ward, is expected to be in town as well, and he's one that's bears watching. So Virginia could end up with a commitment from this weekend. I think it's definitely safe to say that they are on commitment watch, and they should be at least among the favorites for at least two of these athletes who are visiting, at least one to watch. And Virginia is also hosting a number of 2026 athletes as well. So not only are they trying to close out the 2025 class with early signing day about 2 weeks, or less than 2 weeks away at this point, but they're also trying to start the 2026 class with some momentum there, with guys like defensive lineman Dylan Beal coming into town. He's been a guy very high on Virginia. He's already visited UVA before. He's someone from the Peach State who's received several other offers and is certainly one to watch in the 26 class. I could see him wanting to pull the trigger a little bit earlier too. So definitely one to watch moving forward. But with this early signing day coming closer, with that happening December 4th and then the transporter opening December 9th, it's going to get really busy on the recruiting front. Because of the way the calendar works, is the last weekend where Virginia can theoretically visit, have official visitors visit. So they're trying to get some edge rushers in. Obviously, they need to reinforce the defensive line, but they also want to reinforce that secondary. They lost Davin Chandler to Vanderbilt. He flipped. Obviously, remember, he committed to Virginia, then he picked up that Vandy offer, visited Vandy, and then flipped. So they want to fill that spot again, but they also were still looking for a DB to finish out that class. And they also want to make sure that they reinforce the defensive line. They still haven't been able to sign, or at least get the verbal pledge of a defensive lineman that they want. So this is certainly going to be an area of focus. And obviously then you got the transfer portal, and that throws everything off in a little bit too, a little bit more chaos there. But with early signing day on the 4th, it gives the coaching staff a little bit more time to focus on the portal rather than trying to do everything all at once. So this is the first time where the calendar is kind of adjusted to that. So again, we'll have all this coverage on Wahoo's 24/7. We will speak to all the visitors who are going to be on grounds over the next few days. Most of the time, we'll try to get them mostly on Sunday and Monday. Kind of depends on their travels as well. One of the visitors, Travis Milton, will actually be visiting Michigan right after. So we might not be able to speak to him right after the visit, but most likely we'll try to get him either after Michigan or as he travels towards Michigan. So some of these visitors might take a few days, but with some of them returning home on Sunday, we'll try to get in touch with them. But with that, that's the end of this week's episode. We'll be right back here next week. We'll have that episode a little earlier since it's Thanksgiving next Thursday. We'll have obviously the big rivalry game against Virginia Tech. We'll preview that. Colby Crawford from VT Scoop will be joining us on the show with a preview into Virginia Tech. And also we'll look to have some reaction from this weekend's visitors as we might have some trends about where we expect some of these, how these visits went, and where we expect some of these recruitments to go. So stay with Wahoo's 24/7 and make sure you listen in next week. But for right now, hope you guys have a great weekend.